To be truly passive means investing in other people's deals where you're betting on the operator to bring a good deal and execute it with precision, where you all participate on the back end, whatever those profits shake out to be. That's by definition, the most passive way to get into real estate.
What is up, Growth House family? It is your host, Jesse Ray. I'm here with a friend of mine, Jared Vidales. Jared, welcome to the Growth House podcast.
Thank you so much. It's good to finally be on. I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Absolutely. So before we, tell everyone kind of your backstory, what I want to know is, what does life currently look like right now for you? It could be personally, it could be your business, maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, so I had a first son, about, I want to say 8 months ago. And it's honestly like, people really downplay having kids. I always hear I'm sure you do too, like the bad things and, how big of a, time suck it is. But honestly, it's literally been the best thing ever. But I'm sure we're fortunate to, have help and stuff like that. So it's, takes a lot of the load off. So yeah, have him. His name's Walker. My wife has basically been working from home. That's her desk right there. We share an office. She's working from home, hanging out with him, managing the nanny, still banging out work. Once I had him, I realized I'm like, damn, I want to spend as much time as humanly possible with this guy. So I better figure out how to delegate a lot of the stuff, like all the tedious items that I do every single day, just so I could spend more time with him.
That's awesome. And if I remember correctly, you and your wife work together in the business. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're business partners. We were partners first before we got together. So that was back in 2015. She comes from private equity, real estate. Before we even got together in 2015, she's probably flipped over 300 to 400 homes. So all the experience literally comes from her. I didn't know a thing coming into it, but I had a vision, had an idea. She liked it. And we're also, of course, partnered with Jesse and another girl at that point in time. And we were just doing deals.
I love it. So I want to hear this whole come up story, but just real quick, tell the people kind of what is your business? What do you guys do? How do you operate?
Good question. So we focus on distressed real estate here in Arizona. We also are doing the same type of deals out in Texas, so Houston and Dallas, with the vision of going into California, so San Diego, LA, Orange County, in the next probably 60 days. But we focus on distressed assets, and that mainly comes in the form of people who are in default on their mortgage or HOA and just don't have the money to cure those defaults. So we come in, we offer them a solution, and then we enter into a specific type of deal structure, and that's what we do.
You're very humble, man. I'm looking over here at part of your bio. I'm like, residential real estate investor and developer. You built a $30 million personal portfolio from scratch in 3 years. Definitely want to hear how that happened. 40 million under construction, passive income expert. Is there anything I missed in there?
That's basically it,
just do it a little bit.
The vision, or basically kind of what the end goal always is to accumulate assets and just grow the portfolio. I understand it's not everybody's cup of tea, but for us specifically, I just like knowing that I have this bank account that just basically continuing to grow. It spits off the passive income. It's starting to get sexy, but over the years, it just becomes sexier and sexier and sexier. And, I could do all the normal deals that I do on a daily basis, but if I just keep throwing stuff at that, I know it'll take care of us in the long term.
I love it. So let's take a step back. When did you get started in real estate?
2015 is when it was.
As an agent, as a wholesaler, what was kind of your gateway drug into real estate?
Just like everybody else who wants to get into real estate, I wanted to be a flipper, but it was a royal pain in the ass. I had Bitcoin money back then, and I was trying to, it was basically my seed capital. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy houses, I'm going to flip them, make a bunch of money. So in the real world, I actually had to go out and find a contractor and manage this contractor and understand how to buy right and all the title stuff. And those projects, which probably should have taken no more than 70 days, took took about a year to do because, we're hiring crackheads to lay tile, and this guy would piss off this guy and they wouldn't show up for a couple weeks. And I'm like, this is not fun. But what kind of happened was I bought those two deals from wholesalers, and I think he clipped like 20 grand on each deal. But then I went on, took on the exposure, put the money in to make 25 over, a year. I'm like, that seems way easier. Why don't I just do that? Why don't I just become like an expert deal sourcer finder, and I could decide like, okay, I'll wholesale these, I'll flip these, I'll hold on to these. But basically I would be at the top of the food chain because you're buying deals at really, really good prices. So that's what I set on to do. And that's how I got started.
And then how quickly did you realize like, man, this fix and flipping sucks? Like, let me do a combination of really kind of all three strategies. Was that a quick realization or was that multiple years down the road?
No, that was like maybe 4 or 5 months, because the first 4 or 5 months, like I was just stoked to be in it. And I'm like, cool, I'm doing it. I'm out on the West Side eating taco tacos for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm in it, right? I'm going to Home Depot and making sure these guys are doing what they need to do. But yeah, it was just, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of brain damage. And then when I came to realization that, this dude made, this amount of money wholesaling it to me, I'm like, I'm going to start putting my time and attention onto that and figure out how I could do that.
Was it like a company that you started or were you just solo? Explain, how that process worked.
I was solo. I was out kind of just like, I'm a huge researcher, right? Like huge forum guy.
Now it's like,
I was on Reddit.
You're a Reddit guy.
I was on wherever the information was because back then you only had forums. Now you have like Facebook Marketplace and you have an Instagram feed with all these gurus and influencers and whatever. But back then you had to like really dig for it. So where was I going with this?
Yeah, kind of like you were just solo finding deals through forums.
Yeah, so solo. So like that was all my education because back then there wasn't anybody to teach us. So scouring forums, just seeing how do I do this wholesale thing? There's people like, yeah, just go send yellow letters and go put bandit signs out. I'm like, all right, cool. I guess I'm going to go do that. And, I'd be driving around at, all the way up to like 2 a.m, putting out bandit signs on like busy like intersections and in the hood. And, people would call them and I would go out and meet with them and see if we could strike a deal. So basically all self-taught. I was kind of learning at the same time. Carlos Reyes? Yeah, so Carlos Reyes, I think I posted, this is like when Instagram was brand new. He found me through Instagram and he was still working at the payday loan place. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just making letters and sending them to homeowners to try and buy their house for next to nothing. He's like, can I come by and check it out? I'm like, sure, come by. So that's when we did our first campaign together. He's like, I'll pay for the whatever envelopes, I'll pay for stamps, and hired a bunch of crackheads off Craigslist to stamp them, stuff them, and hand write on them. And yeah, we sent out like 5,000 letters, got like 3 or 4 deals from it, made like 95 grand. Yeah, he was hooked. He's like, dude, this is awesome. I'd play like the white investor, right? Even though like I'm Mexican, and then him as the Mexican would play like the good cop and be like, oh, this is the guy with the money, but I'm on your side. And we would just tag team it like that. And they would just go for it. We were about to like partner up with him and Sal, or he brought Sal on board and they wanted me to come on board. And that's when I met Danielle, and she's like, oh my gosh, this girl is beautiful and she's like really smart and does a lot of real estate. I'm like, I want to go with her. And that's kind of like how it kind of all happened.
So walk me through what happened. So you were doing your thing and you and Carlos were kind of working together. You had that campaign going, had some success, and then you met your wife now. Mm-hmm. And like, would you guys go a different direction? You built a company, you joined her company. What did that look like?
Yeah, so we formed a company. So Jesse actually introduced me to Danielle.
Shout out Jesse Burrell.
Because she was his boss back in like the bar days. And then also she hired him to do stuff with like the real estate company. And so like I knew Jesse through mutual friends, and we would like party together, pool parties, stuff like that. And so like one day I was chatting it up. I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to go do this like wholesale thing. He's like, oh, my investor, she's been looking to do something like this. Like, why don't we all just get together and see if there's like any alignment? That's what we did. We went to a Sean Terry event because I was going that day. They came, went and grabbed some Mexican food after. And I'm like, yeah, so this is what I plan to do. And Jesse like kind of put it all together and was like, hey, why don't we just all do this together? I'm like, why not? I was like 22 years old at the time. And yeah, so, we formed a company together and we started marketing for deals, closing deals. And yeah, that was basically it.
And that's still the same company that you guys are still running today?
Correct. Same company running today. But yeah, basically Danny and I separated from the rest of the partners back in it's probably like 2017, I want to say. So we all ran together for a couple of years, and then we broke off. We did real estate. Jesse also did real estate, then started Batch, like a year or two later with Evo. And yeah, we all went our separate ways. Of course, we're all friends, and grew our own individual companies.
That's so cool. I mean, relationships and your network is a big part of Growth House. I mean, our motto is you become who you surround yourself with. So I think it's really cool when you're like friends with other people that are in the same industry, all crushing it together. Was it hard to be like, hey guys, I'm going to go in this direction? How'd you guys make that happen where no bad blood was, lost?
I mean, well, initially, I'm sure it was bad blood. It's a blow to like, oh, it's like a divorce basically. So you're like telling your partners like, hey, this isn't working. But I think what it all boiled down to was like, I'm a hoarder, like oddly enough. Like I always wanted to hoard like real estate and just like grow it. And it's hard when you deal with like multiple households, people who like all own it together. Cause like my biggest fear was like, okay, like what if somebody wants to go slap new debt on it, or maybe somebody wants to sell something that I don't want to sell. It'd just be really hard for me to just like stay focused, like thinking my portfolio might be compromised at any given, or our portfolio is compromised at any given time. So that was basically my underlying motivation.
Got it. And I mean, you say you built a $30 million personal portfolio from scratch in 3 years. What time frame was this and how did that happen?
I would say like 2020 to like 2024. We stopped buying in like it's probably 2019 to like 2022, I would say.
How that happened? Like walk me through that. I mean, people are like, "Oh man, I want to replicate this."
Well, I don't know if you can because we got super lucky. So
Shout out to the rates.
Yeah, shout out to the rates. Yeah, so we basically had, I don't know, like 3 or 4 rentals in our rental pool in like 2018. And growth like from rents and like values were very, very slow from 2018, 19, and then 20. So like there wasn't a huge incentive. Now, what happened in 2020, we had this fake COVID virus thing that came out. And when this COVID virus came out, we had about 45 deals in escrow to wholesale to other investors. Nobody knew what was going to happen, right? So our investors were trading us down on price like every week because like new news would come out and they'd say, hey, look, I know we're in escrow on this, but like we got to adjust the price to X. Like, all right, screw it. And then next week it's like, okay, we got to adjust the price to Y because this is like super gnarly, all the way to the point where I'm like, dude, these assets are like way below replacement costs. Like you can't replace these for what these investors like today need to buy them for. So I'm like, you know what? I printed out all the properties and I underwrote every single one. I'm like, okay, like I put a price next to each one that we needed to go price drop or retrade the seller to. And so I gave that to the acquisition team. I'm like, you guys will see numbers, call the seller, give them this new price that we need to buy it for. If they agree, cool, we're buying it. But if not, cancel it, like get it out of the system. So basically we had like 10 or 15 properties that we got price reductions on because these people didn't know what was going on either. They're like, holy shit, like is the bottom going to fall out? Let's take the price today because tomorrow's unknown. So anyways, we got 15, we closed them all. And I'm like, look, we're going to go in, we're going to rehab these things. If the market takes a shit, then we'll just rent them out and we'll sell them later. right? Because I believed in the pricing. And that's exactly what we did. We threw them all in the construction pipeline. There's a period of time where pricing was just boom, 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 just free falling. Then all of a sudden, with the whole work from home thing, it just hit the bottom and was just going parabolic. So like all these deals that we bought for literally pennies on a dollar were now increasing. The values were increasing at such a exponential rate. We're like, shit, this is insane. So like we sold all the junk and then we kept all the good stuff, like the Chandler houses, the Gilbert houses, the Peorias, Surprises, stuff like that. And we just refinanced everything because the debt was cheap at the same time. So after like that, those 15 houses were either rented out or sold, we still had new acquisitions coming in. And we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to cherry pick the best assets, the best product. We're going to throw it through the construction pipeline, and then we're going to bundle them all together once they're rented out and then go refinance at these cheap rates. So we would do that in like tranches. And so like we'd refinance a pool of like 5 or 8 homes at like 3 or 4% interest rates. And then the pricing was just kept on skyrocketing, right? Like these values just kept going, and we're sitting in the deals at a good price now because values are just exploding and we're in it on cheap debt. So we just ran that model, cherry picked a good product, a good locations, put it into the rental portfolio. Anything else we're going to take down and we're going to flip it, because again, like prices, like pricing on flips was still going up. So like we would take down a deal, like, okay, this flip is going to make 50 grand, but by the time we go to rehab it and sell it, now that profit's 150 grand. And then of course anything that came into the company that was just complete garbage, we would just wholesale out. So we were just running that, like the flips were just the profit center, and then the rentals were just a long-term play. And of course that all came to a screeching halt once Jay Powell started hiking the rates. So the way we grow the portfolio today is buying properties subject to the underlying financing from the seller. I remember looking at a chart. There's a chart out there that said like anybody in the United States that has a mortgage, at least 86% of them has a rate at 4% and under. And at least like 50% has a rate at 3% or under. So even though rates were 7.5, there were still these homeowners who were in a distressed situation that had to sell. So what we would do is like, okay, we'll buy the home, but we want that mortgage. So we would buy the home, we would take over the mortgage, we'd be sitting in it at a really, really good rate. And that's how we are growing the rental portfolio today.
Got it. And did you do that with your primary home, or did you build it?
No, I got that on seller financing.
Ooh, walk me through that deal, because I remember at Sam's, was it a baby shower? Yeah. Devin was like, dude, I want to get some deals from Jared because I want to do what he did for his primary. So I want to hear about this.
Yeah, I got super lucky. And you'll kind of like, as we're going through this interview, understand that like everything that we do, it's all based on macro, right? What are the macro trends, the macroeconomics? Like what's the sentiment of these people who are selling us their homes? So yeah, for my primary house, like we were looking for a house before the interest rates started hiking. Thank God we didn't get anything, even though we were the highest bidder on multiple homes. But weird circumstances happened where they would award the house to somebody else. So we never bought anything. But when rates started climbing, anybody who's in real estate, they understand that residential real estate basically froze. Like everything stopped transacting because buyers weren't sure what was going on. Sellers weren't sure what's going on. Like nobody knew what was going on. There was so much volatility. But whenever there's volatility, there's opportunity, right? So I still wanted to buy my own house, or Danny and I wanted to buy a house. And I'm like, okay, like how are we going to do this thing? I'm like, okay, residential real estate, like it's frozen. So if we're going to do something, it's going to be now. And I'm talking strictly like on the market properties. So what I would do, after we're done, like we come home from work and we're eating and, watching our show, I just hop on my laptop and just look at super cool houses. And I would just email the agent, hey, do you think the seller would be willing to do something creative with the mortgage or do some sort of creative like financing structure? And they would all say, yeah, of course. Yeah, send it over. And I'd just send them like the most ridiculous terms ever. And they're like, oh, I don't know about this. And until one day, like probably 4 or 5 months later, I'm golfing at Mountain Shadows with my buddy, and an agent calls me and he's like, hey, that offer you sent. I'm like, what property was it? It's blah, blah, blah. So I'm pulling it up on Zillow. I'm like, oh, it's kind of a cool house. And he's like, yeah, I don't think we're too far off. I'm like, okay, well, what do we need to move on? It's like, they're cool with the payment. They're cool with the price. We're cool with the monthly payment. We're cool with the price. We just want you to put more down. So I'm like talking it over with Danny. I'm like, do you like this one? She's like, yeah, it's kind of cool. And that like, they want us to come up more on the down payment. So as the offer sat, they were listed at 3.5, 100 days, no offers. I came in at like 3.1 or 3.2, just shaved a little bit off. We pay the seller $10,000 per month installments towards the house. And installments mean straight principal, no interest. So every dollar we were paying to him was just straight pay down. So yeah, 10 grand a month, 11 years, and 220 grand down or something. And Danny's like, okay, tell him we'll put another 120 grand down on the down payment, but we don't want payments for the first year. I'm like, smart. So we're basically prepaying our mortgage for a year instead of like materially coming up on our down payment, which we were, but we really weren't if you look at it from like that revised structure. So I'm like, all right, you got balls. Let's throw it across the fence. And they're like, okay, they'll do it. So, we're getting ready to close this thing. And actually, I'm not going to go into like what makes the deal really good in case the owner, which the previous seller, he's awesome. Heart surgeon, his kids were finally out of the house, all in college, and he's building a house up in Colorado Springs. But yeah, got a badass house, 0% interest for 11 years in Paradise Valley on an acre. And yeah, can't get any better. Can't beat that.
That's incredible. No, I didn't know that backstory, so I actually really love that. Talk to me, Jared, because obviously on Instagram, on social media, all we see is the wins, right? It's all highlights. Give me something where it might have been one of your biggest failures or learning lessons that you get to bounce back from, and how you bounce back.
Yeah, so probably the biggest one was, we ran an acquisition shop where we would buy from these homeowners. We ran that for like 10 years or 9 years. Spend a bunch of money in marketing, bring in deals, monetize those deals, make money, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody saw this coming. So when interest rates started hiking, there was all of a sudden that business model it just didn't work. That business model didn't work where, when rates started going up. And the main reason was, sellers still thought their houses were going like this, but going up, but investors were continuously having to buy down because of the added risk of uncertainty. And now all of a sudden you're creating this gap that you have to close, which at that point the gap was far too big to close unless somebody was really desperate. But now you're just being speculative on your business model. So basically cut all marketing, said we're going to work our existing pipeline until we understand what's going on with this new real estate market. Basically, market never came back, and lost a bunch of acquisition reps, had to pivot the business model to continuously bring deals in. So I don't know if that was like a learning lesson or a failure. I'm sure I could have positioned myself to better weather that storm, because I took a massive pay cut because deal flow virtually ceased to exist. But at the same time, it really made me adapt to do things differently. And, I had a couple, I'm like, okay, I'm basically wiping the slate clean at this point. Like, how do I want to approach our model? And had a couple ideas, did some beta testing. I'm like, that one's not really going to pencil out, or that one's not scalable or whatever. But I think I landed on something that will work to a significant degree that I've identified, that I'm going to start building out a team to run that model. It's a model I can't really chat about in open, because I would say it's pretty proprietary. I'm pretty excited on that. So basically I was just forced to adapt and forced to look for the alpha. Like, where's the discrepancy? Where's the opportunity? Where is nobody else playing? And I think I found it.
And you only were able to find that through going through that quote unquote failure or learning lesson.
Correct.
I love that. You mentioned being a passive income expert. So what are some tips for people who are just getting into real estate, and maybe even seasoned investors, where, you see opportunity to become more of a passive income on the side of passive income rather than an active business in real estate, whether it's wholesaling or whatever they're doing?
Yeah, good question. So real estate's never passive as an operator, right? Rental, if you're operating rentals, it's not passive by any means. I think everybody on Instagram preaches that now, and I think everybody understands that now. To be truly passive means investing in other people's deals where you're betting on the operator to bring a good deal and execute it with precision, where you all participate on the back end, whatever those profits shake out to be. That's by definition, the most passive way to get into real estate. But if you want to operate real estate like me and get your hands dirty, I would say the second most passive way would be to buy properties at a discount and then go sell those properties where you're the bank, where you carry back a loan, and you're basically becoming a subprime lender, if you will. I'll give you an example. So I go out, I buy a house, I take over the existing loan. It's a 3% loan. The loan's $200,000. I pay the seller 10 to vacate. House is worth 300. Now I go and put that house on the market for 300, where I'm carrying back a loan for somebody who might not be able to go get a traditional loan, right? Their only option is people like me or subprime loans, or what those don't even exist anymore. So basically it's me. I'm the only way somebody could get a loan because I'm not a bank and I'm not underwriting based on credit. And I'm saying, okay, if you want to buy this house, it's 25 grand down. I'm going to carry a loan for you, full 30-year loan, fully amortized, but that loan's going to be at 7 or 7.5%. Like, cool. I like it. Rates are at 7 right now. You're charging 7.5. I can't even go get one of these loans. So cool, let's rock. So now what I've effectively done is I'm arbitraging, or I'm making to 7.5% on the difference between the two loans. Let's say at 70 grand. So I'm making 7% on my 70 grand. And what I'm doing is I'm arbitraging the difference between my 3% loan at 200 and then the 7.5 that I'm charging the new end buyer. So now what I've done is, because I'm getting a down payment, now I have no cash in the deal. It's all house money now. And through the arbitrage, I'm making 10 grand a year net, where I don't have to deal with tenants, repairs, increased property taxes, all this stuff, because I don't hold title anymore. That's now on the new guy. So now I just clockwork 10 grand a year, 10 grand a year, 10 grand a year, until they eventually go pay it off. And oh, by the way, guess what? My loan's at 3%, his loan's at 7. My loan's paying down way faster than his is. So if he goes and sells that property 10 years down the road, now that, 70 grand in difference is now 110 grand in difference. And now when he sells it or refinances it down the road, you get that $110,000 pop on top of everything for no cash outlay.
In the worst case scenario is you're not able to pay it anymore. You just take back the home.
Correct.
Interesting.
So second most passive way, outside of just lending money as like a hard money guy, that's the second most passive way as an operator.
What's been your experience? Have you ever done hard money or private money lending?
When I'm done buying and operating, when I'm done buying real estate, I'll always operate the portfolio. But when I'm done, I'll be a hard money lender.
I like it. As we wrap up, I want to know, what are your top podcasts or books? Are you a big reader or a podcast listener?
I am. As far as podcasts, I really like Gary Brecka and Ben Greenfield from a longevity perspective. They're awesome. They're amazing. I like select Joe Rogan podcasts having to do with reverse engineering UAP programs that are black programs and talking about aliens, stuff like that. It's super freaking fascinating. And outside of that, I don't listen to any real estate podcasts, oddly enough. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. I'm I understand all this and nothing's new anymore. So it's mainly longevity podcasts and stuff that I'm just interested in.
So, aliens, are they real?
Yeah, I think they're real.
What do you think has been the biggest case that you're okay, I actually believe they're real? What have you listened to where you're yeah, I believe?
I don't know, from a subjective perspective, I think statistically, they have to be real. And then the government a year ago finally came out and said look, we do have these unidentified aircrafts that we can't explain. And mainly that was pressure from that whistleblower. I forgot his name, but he was in a black UAP program. He's we need to tell the public about this. And so, Congress didn't even know about it. We had these black programs that, was just operating and doing reverse engineering programs. And finally they came out and said yes, there are UFOs and we have recovered non-human bodies hobbies. And then I started going down the rabbit hole of, have you ever heard of remote viewing? So remote viewing is this thing where you could, like, through various techniques, like basically leave your body, basically go anywhere at any point in the past or in the future. It's not like you're there, but like you have like these sounds and these feelings, and you can kind of put images together. There's this guy named Joe McNeagle. He was remote viewer 001 for the CIA and just about every other 3-letter agency. And he went on a podcast, forget whose podcast it was, but it is a very, very well-known podcast. And he was explaining like how he became a remote viewer and then eventually did it for federal agencies. He would explain like these things he would go, like he would do basic, so one of his tasks was, the director of the CIA came into him and said, hey, you're going to go to these coordinates on this time and you're going to tell us what you see. And so he was in Russia in a port, and he's like, okay, and you have a spotter, like the CIA will have a spotter and kind of guide you through so they don't get distracted, so they know like what the target is, right? It's like, okay, so I see this massive building. Like, okay, like what's in this massive building? Because our satellites show that it wasn't there like 6 months ago. I was like, all right, I'm going in, and it's a nuclear submarine the size of 2 football fields. And they're like, you're fucking lying. It's like, all right, continue going. He's like, okay, the submarine was built in this silo, and the talks are they're going to knock the building down and launch it into the ocean. Like, it's impossible because there's no canal or there's nothing where this thing could go into the ocean. So anyways, they wrap up, he gives all the intel, and he's like, watch the satellite. So he's like, they will launch it on this day. And they're like, okay, so they put satellites over the position on that day. And what they saw was the building was demoed. They demolished the building, and there was a canal that was cut into the ocean. And they saw this like gigantic submarine, and like, oh my fucking God, this is the biggest submarine that probably exists in the world. And it's nuclear powered. So you go like story after story after story, like recovering like generals, like family who's gotten kidnapped by like terrorists in Paris and stuff like this. You would have to go and find them and recover them. If the humans have this like capability, like maybe there's an ether out there that we could like just extract or download information from, then I mean, there has to be aliens.
That's wild. I've actually never heard of this remote viewing stuff. Now that's going to be a rabbit hole I'm going to go down.
Dude, it's freaking wild. And what was cool was at the very end, the podcast guy was like, do you think any person could go out and do this? He's like, absolutely. But nobody wants to put in the 5 years, 10 hours a day that it takes to like get there. Just like everything else, right? No, everybody wants to become a real estate investor, but they don't want to put in the 10-hour or the 15-hour days for 5 years to get good at it. Same thing.
What a way to tie it back, man. Real estate and aliens.
Yep.
Dude, last thing, because you mentioned, longevity, and I'm guessing biohacking is something that you're into. What's your one like biohacking tip that you implement in your life?
I don't do anything crazy with like the machines and stuff like that. I'm like scared. I'm scared shitless of our food supply. And so like everything that like for the most part that I eat is all like literally individually sourced from all over the world or locally or whatever. Because like there's so much out there, like so much wrong with our food supply that it just like you can't keep track of it all. So like if I ever have a question about like food or something like that, I'm like, okay, like what 5,000 years ago, what would have we have done? It's like, okay, you're gonna kill the cow and you're gonna eat the cow, or you're gonna get the bison or whatever, and you're going to pick these plants or these berries. So basically, like whenever I have a question about food, I think about that. Like, what did our ancestors do like 5,000 years ago? And I adopt that. That's like a foolproof way of like eating correctly. So it mainly just comes down to food. I just got a shipment in yesterday from Wyoming. I got 60 New York strips. 10...
Oh, I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah, you had Floyd Mayweather with the money on the table, but you had the meat.
I had like Walker right there, and I was taking a picture. I'm like, this looks like a Floyd Mayweather. I'm like, except we're not flexing money or flexing meat.
Dude, I was actually dying when I saw that. I like that. That's awesome. Well, Jared, how do people find you? And also, when people reach out to you, no one's going to say, hey, can I pick your brain? We're part of a go-giving community. We want to provide some kind of value to you since you provided value to us on the podcast. So I know you said you're looking for, more investors and any deals that you're working on. Anything else that we can, as an audience, provide value to you?
Yeah, basically, always looking for deals, but mainly looking for partners or for people who have capital who want to partner on deals. And we have a wide range of deals that we do. I think that's what makes us unique, is because we can look at a property and understand what the highest and best use case is. So we have a deal that fits virtually everybody's risk profile out there. So if you're interested in placing capital with an experienced and creative operator, we're always looking for more partners. We're very diligent with the money. We have full underwriting packages and everything before, you place capital, so like the work's been done. But yeah, outside of that, always looking to meet new people who are in other lines of business, who are innovators, leaders, highly creative. I think that's key. Yeah, that's basically it.
Well, shoot, Jared, you basically just mentioned our mastermind coming up in April, which I think I've even told you about. So we have all the innovators all across different industries, mostly 8 and 9 figure guys. So I'll have to fill you in on that. But Jared, it's been a pleasure, man. Really loved hearing your story. And what's the best platform people can reach out to you on?
Instagram or Twitter. I love Twitter. Big Twitter guy. Go Elon, baby. Let's go. Probably lost 1% of your audience. I know your demographic. Instagram, it's going to be Jared, just Jared Vidales. Straight up.
Perfect. We'll put it all in the description. Jared, again, man, appreciate you, brother. And we'll talk soon.
Go, brother. Talk to you soon. Thank you.